Sorry, there's no audio there.
Now
Sorry
there
about
is.
that, chat. Now there is. To answer your question, yeah, it was good. Just finished up Dialed In, which was a good show. Started that one hot. Starting this one off pretty
Did that
poorly.
one not start hot either?
No, this one started. This last one started great on Dialed In, but this one not so much. This will be fun. This will be a fun show. We get to react to the college football playoff, talk about Bengals. Be a good day.
Be good. I like the Notre Dame hat. The Notre Dame hat is off and rocking. I like it. Big weekend. I mean, upsets galore in college football. Oh, no, wait. It was as chalk could be.
No, you're right. The biggest takeaway is, man, we got to bump this thing up. We got to get to, what, 16, 18, maybe 20 teams? I mean, there's just so many competitive teams in college football on a yearly basis. We got to add another round at least.
I'm not going to make fun of it. I'm not going to make fun of it. I refuse.
Did you see the bracket right now if they would have done the playoff rankings instead of the seeds?
I did.
It's almost like 8 teams is perfect.
8 teams is the right answer. Without question.
Yeah, when they had 4 teams, I was like, okay, I don't mind increasing it, but I don't want 12. Like, I think you could have added 2 more teams, go up to 8, and I think that would have been the safe spot just to kind of, tinker with that. But nonetheless, we'll get to that coming up in a bit. A great game yesterday between the Bengals and the Browns. One of the most entertaining games of the season. Riveting stuff, edge of your seat type of stuff yesterday between the Bengals and the Browns. Somebody had to come out on top. I guess a tie could have potentially been a result of that. But at the end of the day, Cincinnati still mathematically in this. We've talked about this ad nauseum for quite some time. They continue to find ways to win games. I could sit here and just water it down and say, well, look, they've beaten nobody. Look at the teams that they've beaten. But you know what? At the end of the day, there's a lot of teams that aren't in the hunt because they can't even beat the bad teams. This Cincinnati Bengals team, it wasn't a pretty win yesterday, but you know what? They got it done. They're still mathematically in the hunt. You still have to rely on the Dolphins and a Colts loss. You still have to win out, but it sets up arguably the biggest game of the season for the Bengals with the Broncos coming up. But I have to feel pretty good about that Bengals win. It wasn't pretty, but really how pretty have the wins been for the Bengals this season? They've won ugly all year, and winning ugly has put them in a position to make the playoffs still.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is all these games now. I mean, this 3-week stretch was supposed to make us really confident going into these last 2 games because maybe we can dominate the really bad teams, and then we have this false sense of security going into Broncos-Steelers. Well, that wasn't the case. These were 3 very, very ugly wins. The defense certainly did take a step up, and Joe still looks great, but not a lot of added confidence going into these last 2 weeks. I think we all kind of feel the same way we felt about the Bengals all year long. And if they win these 2 games, it's going to be a lot of luck, and we still need a lot of balls to bounce our way around the league. And if we sneak in, who knows what happens. But I'm not much more optimistic than I was before this stretch.
Yeah, I mean,
real quick, Elliot, real quick.
Good.
My God, you could always tell when Jacob goes to a game. You can always tell.
Yeah, listen, it was rough.
He sounds like he just smoked a pack of cigarettes yesterday. I mean, my God, that game was 2 days ago, Jacob. My goodness. But
well, I didn't have yesterday off like I did after Georgia. That's why I was better for off the bench on Monday. I didn't have to do Bengals on Sunday. I apologize to the chat twice a quarter yesterday because it was rough trying to talk about that game for 4 hours when I had no voice.
Listen, I knew the Patriots game was going to matter as soon as we lost it, and it's going to. It's going to be the reason the Bengals missed the playoffs. But it's good. It's good that the Bengals have a shot. It's fun to have meaningful football the final 2 weeks of the season. Win this Saturday, and then you have a meaningful Week 18 game. You're not going to control your destiny, but I guess let's just have some fun. Let's just have some fun if you're not going to make the playoffs. Because it's not going to be – I think the Broncos will lose out. I think it's going to be the Colts and the Dolphins that
which is so funny.
Is who's going to screw us over here, which, it's the irony of everything. But all you had to do is beat the Chargers. Right now you'd be holding a playoff spot. All you had to do was beat the Patriots, beat the Ravens 1 of the 2 times, beat the Chiefs, beat anybody, and you're in the playoffs. Just nothing went our way. We've only beaten bad teams, and now we sit here on December 23rd with a very small chance to make the playoffs, which is sad, but that's what it is. I saw Twitter yesterday was going nuts because, or not going nuts, but I saw somebody saying that, I was against the Bengals tankathon and we should be trying to win every week and yada, yada, yada. We shouldn't be calling for firings. And it's just like, what purpose does going 9-8, not making the playoffs serve? What does that serve? Outside of maybe making Joe Burrow a little bit happier than he would have been had we gone 8-9, 7-10? What purpose does it serve? That's my argument against it. I'm happy we have meaningful football, but at what cost? I don't know what draft pick we're going to get. I don't know what we would have gotten had we decided to go in full-on tank mode.
These last 3 wins dropped us from 8 to 15.
Yeah, it's just brutal. So we'll see. We'll see what the Bengals do next season, but I have very, very little hope that there is a chance at the postseason here.
Win's a win, obviously, as we've talked about. But at the end of the day, were there some things yesterday you guys saw that you're starting to see some improvement? Jenkins calling his name a lot yesterday. I mean, what are some of the positives? Look, the biggest positive is they got the win. They're still mathematically in the hunt to make the playoffs. Obviously, that goes without saying. But it wasn't the same old names that we've been calling for a while. And I don't mean same old names like calling for bad plays. There's some guys that are stepping up. Some guys are coming back, getting a little healthier. That's playing a role too. It's not how you start, it's how you finish. I tell you what, if the Bengals do find a way to make the playoffs, it'd be hard to argue that there's another team out there that is going into the playoffs with more momentum than them. And a lot of that's going to start with some of these guys that we're about to talk about now. But what are some of those names right now that you guys are like, well, damn, like we weren't calling this guy's name early in the season, or these guys are really big difference makers right now?
Well, you touched on the first one right there. It's Chris Jenkins. 2 sacks in a game where we found out afterwards he had flu-like symptoms most of the week, wasn't feeling his best, and has his best pass rush game of his career. And this is a guy you drafted to be a run stopper. And if he can show you even just flashes of being a pass rusher, he's going to be a really special player in the middle of this defense. And if him and McKinley Jackson can continue to play the way they've played over the last couple of weeks, I'm really excited about the way this defensive line is going. I mean, Joseph Osai has taken a massive step in the back half of this season as well. Still haven't seen what we want to see out of Miles Murphy, but the back half of the defense has played a lot better too. Jordan Battle had a phenomenal game yesterday, and Mike Hilton had a couple big-time plays. Neither of those tackles on DTR got him a sack, which was pretty upsetting. They ruled that both were read options, so still 0 sacks on the season for Mike Hilton, but a phenomenal game for him yesterday, and really just the rest of that defense. Geno Stone, we're not talking about cutting him anymore. 3 games in a row against maybe the 3 worst quarterbacks in the league.
We're talking about the Pro Bowl. Yeah, we're talking about the Pro Bowl with Geno Stone.
Well, he's talking about the Pro Bowl for himself.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah.
I will say, I mean, I'm happy that the Bengals defense figured it out, but, I mean, your guy, DTR, is the worst quarterback in the NFL. And it's not even – I don't even think it's remotely close. I think he's so bad that, like, if you gave him the roster of anybody in the NFL, I think he wouldn't win a game. Certainly not with the Browns roster. I mean, he makes the Bengals defense look like superstars, every single one of them. That's tough.
Well, I'm here to disagree with you because you had 2 quarterbacks yesterday that both of them had jobs to do to help their team succeed, and both of them helped their team succeed at the highest of levels. Joe Burrow helped his team get a win, and DTR did what he's supposed to. He's a leader. He went out there and he made every bad play that he's supposed to keep the Browns in position to get a top draft pick. So, don't knock a leader in DTR. He went out there and did exactly what he was supposed to. Oh, Joe Burrow fumbles the ball and puts us in position to possibly make a game of this. Not so fast, my friend. I want to give it right back to you. All right, we're going to get into the red zone and have a chance to cut this to within the possession. Not so fast, my friend. He did exactly what he is supposed to. So you need to back off on my guy DTR. You need to back off on him. He did exactly what he
that was a leader performance.
If the Browns were going to act like they were going to try to win games, they'd still be playing Jameis.
That's right.
Yes, and look, and I'm not going to sit here. The Jameis thing, people talk about that a lot, but like the record is not any better. Like, let's be real. I mean, he makes it more enjoyable to watch, but I mean, I think he's like 2-4 as the starter.
You probably would back into another win, maybe 2, if you compare full season of DTR to full season of Jameis, just because of the arm talent, and some of those 60-yard picks will be caught for touchdowns.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, certainly where you're at right now, you can play the game if we want to see what we have in DTR, and it'll probably result in a better draft pick.
Andrew makes a good point in the chat. We would really like to see Jameis take on the Dolphins. That would be a lot of fun for us all. So I think if the Browns had
Ohio against the world right there. Ohio against the world.
If the Browns had any gumption, they'd start Jameis. They'd start Jameis Winston and help the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, Jameis, man, what you want to talk about a roller coaster? I mean, that was we've joked about that for weeks. That was the true Jameis experience. He had games where it's like, how is he not a starter? And he proved why he's a starter in this league. And then he has other games where he proves why he hasn't been married for long term with any team outside of that. But no, the Bengals get the win. They're still mathematically in the hunt. No help yesterday. I mean, they helped themselves. They keep them in that position right there. But yeah, the Colts, it got interesting down the stretch. I'm like, my goodness, if the Bengals get a win and the Colts lose that game, and there were opportunities for them to lose that game yesterday, that would have been one wild, Sunday. But again, nothing to take away. Look, at the end of the day, nothing happens unless Cincinnati wins out, and that sets up this game with the Broncos. But yeah, Cleveland did them a lot of favors yesterday, no doubt about it. So, all right, Justin Kenner, Casey McAllister, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here. This is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. Kind of a boring weekend in the NFL. Not a whole lot happened. I know that the Chiefs, played on Saturday. I know they played in the middle. The Chiefs and Texans, they played kind of in the middle of all the college football playoff action as well. I know, Jacob, you said you weren't going to watch any of that game. I'm sure you're out and about at that game, of course, in Columbus. But I'm curious, how much of that did you guys get to watch, and any takeaways from that Chiefs-Texans game?
I watched some of it. I had it on my phone while I was walking around on Saturday. But, yeah, I mean, I think the NFL, I'll be interested to see when these numbers come out. But I didn't see it being talked about nearly as much as other NFL games. I mean, even though the college games were blowouts, they were dominating the conversation. These were good games against playoff teams, but – yeah, I'll be interested to see when these numbers come out because I certainly didn't pay as much attention to them as I normally do in NFL slate.
Usually I would watch those games, and I was watching college football over it. So I get why they had to do it, but it did certainly hurt. I think the Ravens game did. I think the Ravens game probably did better.
I would assume Ravens Steelers gets a pretty dominant draw for any window they put it in.
But Chiefs Texans probably didn't get anybody hyped up to watch, but
I mean, not only were they going against Penn State, SMU, but North Dakota State, South Dakota State, FCS semifinal, and ESPN 2, absolute banger of a game.
Yeah.
So the injury in that game, was it Tank Dell? Who got injured?
Yeah,
Why am I drawing
Tank
a blank?
Dell.
Tank Dell.
Again.
That was, first of all, that injury is gross. That the way that I don't think things are supposed to be coming out of your leg the way that one was. But CJ Stroud's reaction, I mean, just the emotion on that to whatever. But I'm like, dude, you got to pull it together. Like, you were the starting quarterback of this team. You got to go out there and lead. He was trying to get in the back of the ambulance with the dude. They were having to hold him back. I mean, he just bawling on the sideline. I'm like, you could be upset that your dude's down, but you got to go out there and set that tone. And sure enough, they go out there flat, missed the field goal, and at that point, you knew it was over. Not just because of the injury, but I don't think they handled the reaction to that injury well, and it's easy for me to sit here and tell a team how they need to respond to an injury. But I thought that was a very weird scene in Kansas City. Just weird stuff continues to happen. The Chiefs get a win. They win ugly every single damn week at this point, but a win's a win, and they take care of business against the Texans team that was looking for a staple win to put them back into the conversation as a top team heading into the playoffs here in a few weeks.
Every game the Chiefs win is a one-score game. Every single one. I mean, it's except for what? The Browns game? When was the last non-one-score win they've had that wasn't the Cleveland Browns? I'm going back.
Panthers?
Panthers, they won by 3.
I'm going back.
Yeah.
They beat the 49ers by 10 on October 20th. That was the last time they won by more than more than one score. So I don't get it. I don't think the Chiefs are the world's best team. I certainly don't think the Texans are good. I think if you had to power rank playoff teams in the NFL and the AFC right now, it would probably be Bills 1 by a wide margin, Ravens 2, Chiefs 3, Steelers 4, Bengals 5, Colts 6, and then the Chargers, and then the Broncos, and the rest of them. But I don't think the Texans are very good.
Where would you put the Texans in amongst league-wide division leaders right now? Bills, Steelers, Texans, Chiefs in the AFC, Eagles, Lions, Falcons, Rams in the NFC.
NFC South sucks, so I'm going to say they're one above the NFC South, but barely.
I'd put the Rams above them.
I'm absolutely.
That's what I'm saying. I think they're the second worst division champion right now, behind notably the worst division in football.
Yeah, it is. I don't think they've got it. I don't think they've got what it takes to win a playoff game.
Pretty confident in saying the AFC North team that doesn't win that division is going to run them out of their stadium.
Yeah, I would say so. I would bet a lot of money on it.
By the way, from a Bengals perspective, the Ravens winning over the weekend, kind of that was a problem, right? Because now that sets up to where if the Steelers won, that sets up the probability of them potentially resting guys in that final week of the regular season. The Steelers, and again, not saying the Bengals can't beat them if they're playing everyone at full strength, ready to, trying to fight, but they're going to be fighting potentially for an AFC North title in that final week of the regular season, to where we thought there was a chance it could be resting everybody. Not saying the Bengals aren't capable of beating them, but we've yet to see Cincinnati beat a team over 500 to this point. that didn't do them, I don't want to say any favors. It's not like the Bengals can't do it. But again, now all of a sudden you will be facing a Pittsburgh team. You're going to be facing Denver and Pittsburgh the next 2 weeks, both teams fighting for a playoff spot or a division title in Pittsburgh's case.
The way I'm talking myself into that actually being better for the Bengals, that the Steelers lost that game, is because I don't believe in the Steelers as like Super Bowl champions, but still a really, really good team that I think can make a run. And we need them to beat Kansas City this week. So if they would have beaten Baltimore last week, I don't know that they're winning 2 games in a row against 2 elite AFC teams, but coming off that Baltimore loss, I'm much more confident that Mike Tomlin gets his guys ready to play Kansas City this week. And if they beat Kansas City and Buffalo wins, that means Kansas City has to play their guys against Denver. And I would rather take our chances with our starters against the Steelers starters than Denver starters against the Chiefs backups.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat as Jacob here. I think it's actually pretty good for us because if they would have won that, they clinched the division. They don't really have to play for anything the final 2 weeks of the season, and they certainly have no chance to beat Kansas City. But now I would think that they might be even favored. I would favorite them in that game just because of how the Chiefs have looked. A one-score game going up against a defensive juggernaut like the Steelers, I don't like the Chiefs' chances.
All right, Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. We'll pick up with a little more Bengals talk on the other side. We'll transition to college football coming up around the corner. The Cincinnati Reds made a move over the weekend. I know I'm missing something. The Bearcats knock off Dayton in the top 25 showdown this past Friday. Some weekends go by super fast. Others just drag on. It dragged on this weekend, not in a bad way. There's just so much happening, and we have so much to cover here on our last show for a couple days before we return on Thursday, of course. But we have a lot more to get into here on this Monday. This is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. All right, and we are back. This is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. College football playoff action, I guess first round action that we'll react to coming up here shortly. What a weird weekend in college football. 4 games that were not very entertaining at all, but still dominated all the headlines coming out of the weekend, of course. We'll get into that here shortly. The Reds made a move. They add a catcher. They move on from one of their top bullpen pieces to do that. We'll discuss that coming up here around the corner as well. Cincinnati Bearcats knock off the Dayton Flyers Friday night in the top 25 showdown. We have more of that coming up here shortly, but we can wrap up some of the NFL conversation here. We're not dismissing what the Bengals did yesterday or just kind of blowing past it. We're just covering a lot today just because the fact we're off for the next couple of days. But biggest takeaway, last thing as we close the book on this Bengals-Browns matchup from yesterday, it was less about who the Bengals played and more just about keeping their head above water at this point. Talked about what we like, some of the guys that stepped up in yesterday's game, of course, but your biggest takeaway about how the Bengals and Joe Burrow are performing at this point heading into the final 2 weeks. Mathematically, still very much in it. And I know every week we do the same thing. Like, do you believe that they have a chance? But like, are you more confident that they can actually pull this off now as we're getting closer, or is this just becoming more and more doubtful? Especially after yesterday, outside of the Bengals winning, nothing really happened to put them in position to feel more secure about landing a spot here in a few weeks.
I do not feel better. I know you want me to be positive. I'm not. I just can't be positive. It's not in me to be positive. I've looked at it every which way. They haven't beaten a good team. I mean, they legitimately haven't beaten one good team. Not one on the schedule. They have 7 wins. All of them are against really, really bad NFL teams. That was what the schedule was. So they've done their job for the most part, I guess. You lose to the Patriots. If you would have beaten the Patriots, again, everything's changed if you beat the Patriots. All you had to do is beat the Patriots. But they didn't. And now you sit at 7-8, and I don't think there's a high chance. If you want me to be positive, I'll say this. No playoff team in their right mind would want to play the Cincinnati Bengals. None. Not the Kansas City Chiefs, not the Buffalo Bills. There is not one playoff team out there that wants to face Joe Burrow round 1. Not one. So if the Bengals were to get into the playoffs, then we got a different ballgame. Then I'm going to probably start saying that the Bengals should be favored in a playoff game, and I'd take them to win a playoff game. But the fact that you need the Dolphins to lose, and you need the Colts to lose, and you need the Broncos to lose twice, it's going to be a tough test. But like we said, you have meaningful football on Saturday. It's the biggest game of the season. It's, for all intents and purposes, it's a playoff game. So treat it like a playoff game. Beat the Denver Broncos. Go to 500 and try your best to have Week 18 mean something. That's what I want. If you lose to the Broncos, I would pack it in, but that's just my opinion. I would just say let's bench them and let's lose to the Pittsburgh Steelers. But yeah, you absolutely have a chance. You have a very small chance, but a chance it is.
Yeah, I'm, like I said earlier, less optimistic than I wanted to be after this 3-game stretch. I was hoping I was going to be talking crazy after the defense and offense just stomped on 3 absolutely terrible teams, but not the case. 7-point win in Dallas, 10-point win against the Titans, and then 24-6 yesterday, but that's not representative at all of how close that game was. Late touchdown to Jamar Chase to blow that score open a little bit, and yeah, I mean, the Broncos, they're not a good team. We know what the Broncos are. They're fine, and they're going to get in the playoffs because the good teams in the AFC, one of them being the Bengals, or at least with an elite quarterback, didn't take advantage of the opportunities in front of them, and that's why we're going to see a team like the Bo Nix-led Broncos in the playoffs. And it's a shame. I think if you ask really any NFL fan, they'd rather watch the Bengals than the Broncos in the playoffs, but that's not what we're going to get in most likelihood. I think that if we're talking about reality here, then it's much lower than the percentage that we're being given, because it's up to about 26% depending on where you look. And I think there's just a lot of stuff that has to happen. I mean, a lot of people are forgetting that the Bengals can win out and still not make it.
Yeah.
That's a huge part of this. And I think winning out in and of itself is very, very difficult. This team's playing good ball right now, not great ball, and they needed to take a bigger step before these last 2 games. I don't think Geno Stone getting a pick off Cooper Rush, Will Levis, and DTR makes me feel like he's going to play well against Russell Wilson and Bo Nix.
Yeah, and you look at and that's the thing too. So the Colts, when you look at them have coming up, they have the Giants and the Jags. All right, they have to lose one of those. It's not saying it can't happen. They almost lost a game yesterday that I didn't think that they would have even come close to losing. The Titans, took them down to the final stretch, and then the Dolphins, who looked very solid over the weekend. They're going to have, of course, the Browns and the Jets coming up, and the Browns are doing everything they can to not win a game, and the Jets continue rolling Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams out there. They put up 9 points yesterday. They're not winning a football game either. I think right now, not being negative, but it's more about those other teams, and the probability of them losing seems very slim. The Dolphins playing well, Colts playing okay, and let's not forget those are 2 teams also fighting for their playoff lives at this point. They also feel like, hey, we mathematically still in it, but it's a long shot. But they have to take care of those teams in front of them as well. And then of course Denver, Cincinnati. The best thing they have going for them right now is the fact that you control your destiny against them a little bit. You knock them off, they're going to be reeling a bit heading into a matchup with the Kansas City Chiefs. It's still realistic that they could lose out. But which team do you think is more likely to get a loss down this stretch? The Colts and the Dolphins. You need both to get a loss. You look at the Colts, who have the Giants and the Jaguars. The Dolphins have the Browns and the Jets. Which of those 2 teams is more likely to pick up a loss in the final couple weeks?
I don't think it's super likely that either win out, but I think it's just as unlikely that one of them lose. Like, I don't know how to say it. I don't think either of these teams are very good. The Dolphins are going to Cleveland and to the Jets. What's their kryptonite? What's their Achilles heel? Playing in the cold. They're going to Cleveland and New York. That should work in our favor. And then I'm obviously a bigger Anthony Richardson guy than most in the room, but certainly a volatile quarterback, and he's going to New York, which is going to be cold, less than ideal conditions. And then the Jaguars are still fighting.
Here's what I'll say. In 2021, the Indianapolis Colts had a chance to clinch the postseason in Week 18, or the final week of the season. I don't know what it was in 2021. In the final week of the season, the Indianapolis Colts had a chance to make the postseason. They were 9-7, a win, you're in. Who did they play that final week? They played a 2-win Jacksonville Jaguars team. A 2-win Jacksonville Jaguars team. They lost that game outright, 26-11, to miss the playoffs. The 2-win Jacksonville Jaguars beat the 9-win Colts 26-11 to eliminate them from the playoffs that final week. I'm not going to rule anything out. I think the Colts are always just good enough to make the wild card and always just bad enough to seemingly always miss. So I'm going to say that both teams have a significant chance to lose at least a game. But Dolphins have more. Dolphins have more of a chance. Dolphins will lose a game. Dolphins.
Other headlines coming out of the weekend, of course. How about for one, watching Tampa lose kind of surprised me a bit. They had a prime opportunity to get back in the driver's seat in that division. They get a loss. The Falcons, they debut Michael Penix Jr. in the start, and they come away with the win. He looked okay. He didn't pop off the page or whatever, but they put up some points and they come away with the win. They're sitting in that 4th spot in the NFC right now. 8-7 are the Falcons. Tampa's 8-7 as well, but the Falcons, of course, they hold the tiebreaker over Tampa based on their head-to-head win percentage at this point. The NFC, top storylines out of the NFC that are catching your attention. I know you guys have been keeping an eye on that Michael Penix Jr. situation. We got to see him over the weekend. Your thoughts on how he looked?
Not what I wanted to see. I was hoping he would come out and just burn the world down, but he's fine. I mean, he got him a win. He got him a dominant win against a really bad team, and that's important. I mean, he turned the ball over, which is obviously why they went away from Kirk Cousins. So if anything, you would have liked to not see that. But yeah, I mean, he got a win over a bad team in his first start in the middle of the season. I mean, usually when a rookie starts, I don't care how good your team is or how high the expectations are, you at least have a little bit of time to get your feet wet. In week 1, week 2, week 3, you can talk yourself about crawling out of a hole if you did one in the early season. Now, at this point in the season, throwing Penix into the fire in a playoff race where you have to win out to make the playoffs in all likelihood,
Yeah.
that's pretty crazy. And I think for him to go in and get a win against a bad team in a dominant fashion is impressive, even if the stat line didn't show it.
I will say the interception was hilarious.
Yeah, it was really bad.
It was one of the funniest interceptions I've ever seen. So he threw it to Kyle Pitts, your guy, another one of your guys. Kyle Pitts, I believe, just handed it off to the New York Football
He
Giants.
threw it to the Giants guy.
So I think Michael Penix played fine. He game managed his way to a win. It was a solid game.
I think we have an absolutely electric game coming up on the 29th. Falcons, Commanders, Sunday Night Football. That's going to be awesome.
Yeah, it will be. It will be really good.
Especially if Jaden Daniels keeps playing the way he's playing. I've seen a lot of Eagles fans dunking on the Commanders after yesterday, saying, oh, you're enjoying this win too much.
Yeah.
All you did was beat a backup quarterback. Haven't the Eagles exclusively beaten backup quarterbacks when they beat the Commanders for like the last 15 years?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Taylor Heineke, Carson Wentz, RG3, Kirk Cousins, they were backups of each other.
Yeah.
I mean, all these guys are backups. So I think the Commanders had a great win yesterday. I think they're peaking at the right time. Luke said it this morning on Dialed In. I think the Commanders are really scary just because when they put it all together, they can score. And that defense might not be the best at holding teams down, but they get opportune turnovers a lot.
Yeah.
And if you can get the ball back to Jaden Daniels, he's proven he can do a lot with not a lot of time. So I don't think you want to play the Commanders if you're looking at the NFC playoff race right now. I know everyone's focused on the NFC North teams, but I think the Commanders are scary.
Lattimore, I did think he left that game with an injury, so
Yeah.
we'll see if he's going to be able to come back because he's massive. But good for the Commanders. The Commanders are a scary team. The Commanders are the Bengals in an alternate universe.
Yes.
Where they added at the deadline.
Or
They
the
added a
Commanders
good
are-
defensive player and
The Commanders are the Bengals like 2 years ago.
or that. They're fun to watch.
Yeah, Commanders are doing what I thought, like the way I thought the Texans were going to look coming into the year.
Yes.
Because I thought there were a lot of parallels between the Texans of this year and that 2021 Bengals team. Quarterback who looked great his rookie season. I expected, the way Joe Burrow took off in year 2 was what I was expecting out of C.J. Stroud. You look at the dynamic weapons in the wide receiver room, capable running game, average defense. That's what the Bengals had in 21. That's what the Texans have this year as well. I thought the Texans checked off every box to be the 2021 Cincinnati Bengals or have the opportunity to do that. You're right, though. The Commanders are kind of that team right now. They're in that spot right now, just with a rookie quarterback instead. So we'll see what happens with them. But they're sitting in that 7th spot at 10-5. Packers are 10-4 in the 6th spot. The Vikings 13-2 as the 5 seed, and then of course the division leaders right now: the Lions, Eagles, Rams 1, 2, and 3 with the Falcons and Buccaneers fighting for that 4th spot. It always is weird, everyone complains about the college football playoff format. It's not as much of a hot take with the NFL, but it always is strange when you look at playoff standings. You see a team at the 4th seed who's 8-7, and then you see a team like the Commanders at 10-5 and Green Bay at 10-4 who are fighting to hold on to one of those final playoff spots. So it is strange. And we've seen that in the past. The Cowboys have finished with like 8 or 9 wins and then hosting a playoff game, like what they did a few years ago. I think that was against Tom Brady's Buccaneers team too, if I'm not mistaken. So always looks weird when you see that.
Yeah, I'm really excited for that Week 18 matchup, hoping the Lions and the Vikings can take care of business this week. Not sure who the Lions play, but the Vikings up against the Packers, that's going to be a good game for sure. But if both win, if both are sitting at 14-2 going into that last week, that Vikings at Lions game is going to be for the North and for the 1 seed. And it's just crazy, like you just said, with the NFL format, that they could be playing for the 1 seed, loser gets the 5 seed. You're either playing every game, the whole playoffs at home, or you're going on the road in all likelihood the whole way. Just crazy that that's the drop-off, but hopefully we do get that game. An added playoff game is always fun, and if it's between two really, really good teams, that's even better.
All right, last thing here in the NFL that I don't know if you guys saw this. I think, Jake, you had texted me this over the weekend too, but possibility of Kirk Cousins being outright let go by the Falcons after the season, Cleveland being a potential landing spot there. A lot of noise about the Browns' upcoming offseason on whether they're going to blow this thing up or they're going to go back for one more run to try to piece some of this together this upcoming offseason. Kirk Cousins in Cleveland, look, as much as I want to say, I mean, it makes a lot of sense just because the connection and the relationship he has, of course, with Kevin Stefanski. Kirk Cousins, one of the best seasons he ever had, of course, was in Minnesota under Kevin Stefanski. Makes a lot of sense if there's something left in the tank. We felt good about the Falcons coming into the year because of the prospect of Kirk Cousins playing for the Falcons. Has he just lost it all together, or is this a guy that's just trying to get back in shape and battle back from a gruesome injury from a year ago?
I mean, he got benched because he had a bad 4-game stretch. He also broke the Falcons' single-game passing record earlier this year. Like, it's still in there somewhere. It's just a question of how consistently can you get that good enough play. And I don't think we know, but I think we're going to be able to find out next year. I'd have a hard time imagining the NFL going into week 1 of next year without Kirk Cousins starting at quarterback. And if I were able to bet on it right now, I would bet on Cleveland. I think that makes a ton of sense because he'd be getting $28 million from the Falcons next year in guaranteed money. That offsets on a contract, so he would sign a vet minimum deal. And that makes more sense for where the Browns are at right now than drafting a rookie quarterback, especially if Myles Garrett's going to force himself out if you go to a rebuild. So go sign Kirk Cousins for $2.5 million, do the Russell Wilson in Pittsburgh thing, hope it works for a year, and then maybe next year you can figure out where to go from there. But yeah, if you can dribble out the clock on some of the star players you do have in Cleveland by signing Kirk to a 1-year vet minimum deal, you absolutely do it and put up the illusion of competing.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, all he would do would continue the trend of, and I think he's better than these other guys I'm about to mention when he's rolling. But like he'll continue the trend of the Joe Flacco, Jameis Winston style of quarterback that is going to come in for some games and put up big numbers. And you think, my goodness, what can this Browns offense do, especially if they can get that run game figured out? And they're going to throw for a lot of yards. And then there's going to be those Kirk Cousins games that is very reflective of what we've seen from Joe Flacco over the last couple of years and Jameis Winston. You're going to get that roller coaster type of production if that's the case. A big game. Couple games, throw for a lot of yards, throw for a lot of touchdowns, and then have a couple games where he throws a lot of passes to the other team, and you're scratching your head. But that's the cycle the Browns are in right now until they can get out of this contract with Deshaun Watson. You're going to continue finding guys that can come in, throw for a lot of yards, make you feel confident that you can compete, but they're also going to remind you why they've been bouncing around over the last couple of seasons. That could potentially be the case. The biggest reason that makes sense, too, is it's just what you guys said. You look at the fact that the Steelers go get Russell Wilson. If they had to sign Russell Wilson for anything outside of $2 million, and they got him for less than that, knowing what we've seen the last couple of years, Pittsburgh probably doesn't even touch Russell Wilson this past offseason. But it was a win-win. If you bring him to Pittsburgh and he fails, you're out $1 million. Who cares? If you bring him in and he succeeds, you're getting production from a position that normally costs you for an average quarterback 25 to 35 mil, and you're getting it for $1 million. Cleveland's going to potentially kick the tires on the same thing with Kirk Cousins if it leads to that. It's the exact same type of situation, and Kirk Cousins is going to want to go somewhere where he feels comfortable with the coach that can get the most out of him. He's done that with Kevin Stefanski before. But what does that mean for Cleveland? Who knows? We'll get more to I know that Myles Garrett had some interesting things to say about his future in Cleveland. We'll push that back to another conversation later on. But I want to get to the Cincinnati Reds. They made a move over the weekend that I'm kind of curious your guys' take on. Look, we debated this last week. Are the Reds done this offseason? I think we meant done as in any kind of splash move. Do we consider what the Reds did over the weekend to be a splash move? We'll get to that when we come back. More Off the Bench next. All right, and we are back off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. So over the weekend, the Cincinnati Reds, they trade Fernando Cruz and catcher Alex Johnson to the Yankees to get catcher Jose Trevino. Again, that's been the big talking point out of Cincinnati when it comes to the Reds from over the weekend. I know we've been sitting back and waiting. The Reds have been in on some bigger names. We talked about the pitcher from the White Sox that they were close to landing, one of two finalists to land him, close to landing Garrett from the White Sox, who ultimately went to the Red Sox. It was Reds and Cubs, we were told, are reported to be the two finalists to land him, ultimately ends up with the Red Sox. You look at last week, in on some other big names, Teoscar Hernandez in the free agent market. Eventually, we have to see the Reds pull the trigger on landing a big name and putting their money in their money in their mouth, where the talk is at this point, or the rumors are. But they make a move over the weekend, and I'm not really sure what to make of this. Look, they address a need. They add depth to a position that they needed to address. And most importantly, they add a guy that, does that thing that not a lot of Reds did last year, and that's play defense. Your guys' reaction right away when you saw this trade go through, that the Reds, again, send Fernando Cruz to the Yankees to land catcher Jose Trevino.
It was a trade. And it happened.
It happened. I got the notification.
And, new player on the Reds, player formerly on the Reds, on a new team. Look, everyone acting like this is such a big deal that we traded a 35-year-old relief pitcher. I'm not in that boat. I think you got a backup catcher, which is something you definitely needed. We're not running Luke Maley out there, to catch 50 games or whatever, when we can probably catch Tyler Stevenson exponentially less, because Jose Trevino is a pretty good catcher, and he at least puts up decent numbers. He's one of the better defensive catchers in all of baseball, one of the best framers in all of baseball, and who knows how long that's going to matter with ABS coming relatively soon, but it's going to matter this year, and that'll certainly help the Reds get a couple strikes. And as long as you invest this much into the pitching staff, getting a good defensive catcher is not a bad way to operate. I think Austin Jackson's a decently exciting prospect, but Jose Trevino is going to help this year, and I think he'll probably help more than Fernando Cruz would have.
The Fernando Cruz hype, I'm confused.
He's legitimately my favorite Red.
I'm confused as to why. I know he was yours, but he's not good at baseball. So I don't know what everybody was like. He has in 2 seasons with the Reds, in 2 notable seasons with the Reds, he has a 4.9 and a 4.8 ERA. Yeah, he strikes out a lot of guys, but he strikes out a lot of guys because he walks 4 and then wild pitch strikeout. He'll get 4 strikeouts an inning. I have no issue with Fernando Cruz. He's 40 years old. He's not particularly good. The Yankees can have him. Go ahead. He was our number 1 reliever last year. He threw a lot of innings. The year before that, Ian Jabot was that guy. What did Ian Jabot do last year? Wasn't available because he threw a lot of innings. I would think that Fernando Cruz what Fernando Cruz would have done this year probably wouldn't have been much.
In Cincinnati. Now that he's on the Yankees, he's going to be unbelievable. The back end of their bullpen when they win a World Series this year is going to be Luke Weaver and Fernando Cruz.
Yeah, it's tough. But saying that, I have no thoughts on this trade other than Trevino, I guess, can't be worse than what Luke Maley was last year.
I was happy with it. I was honestly pretty upset, or not upset, but surprised when I opened Twitter or OX.com and saw a lot of people were not excited about this trade. I thought it was a pretty good move to get some decent value out of Fernando Cruz.
What do people think Fernando Cruz is worth?
What were you going to get for him?
I think getting any warm body is a good trade for Fernando Cruz. No disrespect.
He was an all-star, 2-3 years ago?
Yeah. I mean, Fernando Cruz, high strikeout, but he has basically 2.5 ERAs the past 2 years. There was a lot of innings. 66 innings, 66.2 innings. Trevino, he's here for his defense. I imagine that Tyler Stevenson, I saw this as well. I imagine Tyler Stevenson is going to maybe be playing more DH this season because of this move. Trevino's a veteran catcher in the league, so he knows what he's doing a little bit. But he doesn't really hit well, I would say. He hasn't hit above 250. He hasn't had an OBP above 290 ever. So, in fact, his highest OBP in a season was last year, 288. His highest average in a season was 258, 2019. So he's not here to play offense. He's here to be a good defensive catcher. That's what Luke Maley's role was supposed to be last year. So I'm okay with the move. I have no complaints. But this is not a serious transaction.
Yeah, this is just I think right now people are focusing less on who the Reds brought in and focus more on a name that they saw ship out. And I think that, it's just one of those things where, and we talked about this last week, no matter what happens, there's going to be a pocket of Reds fans who are going to be upset no matter what this team does. I think there's sometimes a lack of understanding of what the Reds have to do to be able to add depth pieces to this roster, a team that's not very deep and a team that's not very good defensively. And to improve at a couple of those deficiencies, you're going to have to sacrifice some strengths at other key positions. And like you guys said, you could debate all day about just how much of a strength Fernando Cruz was. Fernando Cruz played just much of a role to be a strong enough candidate to be able to acquire a depth piece for this roster at a position that they needed to address. In Trevino, I think, and I'm glad you brought that up about the Stevenson thing to be utilized more as a DH. He was one of their better bats last year. I think he had quietly a very good year, and then I don't think got talked about enough for how I don't think he was very good 2 years ago. He had a very down year 2 years ago. A lot of people were scratching their heads saying, I wonder what we still have with Tyler Stevenson after the very good year he had the season before. And quietly, he put together a very good season last year. And if you could keep him in that lineup more and kind of balance that out between him and Trevino, I'm all for that. They didn't have very good options, with the backup catcher last year. Maley was supposed to be that guy. I think they wanted more out of him. Obviously, you brought in Tucker Barnhart late last season, of course, just to kind of kick the tires on that. But there's nothing left there. I don't mind this move. To be able to get pieces, you have to give up and sacrifice some pieces. And I think of all the pieces the Reds could have given up to address this need, that one was not that drastic. That's why this was a move, but not a move when it's all said and done. And this does fit what Nick Kroll told us last week when he was on the Hot Stove League show with the Cincinnati Reds. He said, look, right now, the nature of the trade market, teams aren't interested in sending MLB-ready talent for prospects right now. All the guys that are available right now through trades, you got to give up MLB-ready talent to get MLB-ready talent at this point, and that's exactly what we saw. I think that fits the narrative, not really narrative, but that fits the kind of the situation that is baseball right now in the market, in the trade market. I don't mind this at all. I saw that their win total improved by 1 game after this edition of Trevino. So who knows? Who knows?
Here we go.
Tyler Stevenson, 26 doubles, 19 home runs, 66 runs batted in. All 3 of those were career bests last year. He had a hell of a season. A 340 OBP, a 260 batting average, 782 OPS. Tyler Stevenson's a good player, so I'm happy that, because I had a lot of doubt in Tyler Stevenson. I'll be the first to say that. I was a Tyler Stevenson hater coming into this year. I didn't think all the hate placed on Jonathan India was warranted when Tyler Stevenson was roughly the same type of offensive player, but he improved massively last season, and I'm excited to see what he does this year. I would love to see him play more than 138 games, because that's what he did last year, 138 games, which is 4 less than 2023, believe it or not. I would like to see him DH more. So this opens that window, and hopefully we have a catcher that can at least contribute a little bit more than Luke Maley did, with all due respect to Luke Maley.
Yeah, and even those numbers you read for Trevino, pretty big offensive jump compared to Luke Maley's from last year.
That's correct. Also,
Tyler Stevenson.
Go ahead.
No, you're good. Keep going.
I was going to change the subject, so keep going with Tyler Stevenson.
No, that's fine. So Tyler Stevenson, would you say who was the most underappreciated Red last year? Was he the most underrated Red last year? Do you think? I know for me he was. I didn't. I don't feel like I paid attention to him. Yeah.
So he's the most underrated.
Hunter Green's certainly up there.
And then the local writers think Ellie was worse than
Arias.
Well, yeah, Luis Arias. So I would say those 2 were the most underrated Reds this year.
I'm trying to think of who the most underrated Red would be.
I think Stevenson's the right answer. I think he had a really great year, took big strides forward, and he just kind of gets shoved to the back with the young core. But I think he's part of that core.
Espinal, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, Stevenson was certainly people don't talk about Tyler Stevenson. I would say he cemented himself last year as maybe a top 10 catcher in Major League Baseball. I don't know. I think it's pretty damn close.
Yeah. So you again, when we think about the lineup, and obviously what you have with Ellie, you hope you know what you have with Matt McClain. Stevenson to be a guy you can count on the regular in that lineup. And that's probably why one of the reasons this move was made, as you guys mentioned, to be able to utilize him as a DH more, to get him more at bats, to get him more involved. He could be a guy that I think really plays a huge role in the turnaround of this team this upcoming season, especially. They still have to go out and make one more move, though. They have to make one more move. I don't want to be repetitive with these Red segments every time. Does this move technically address any of that? No. But these are by the way, these are the kind of moves that you would expect the Reds to make anyways. You still expect
Correct.
one more big one, you hope, but these are the kind I'm happy with these moves because the Reds aren't just sitting down and saying, well, we're not going to do it unless it's a move that we can, unless it's a big move that we can get on the cheap. We're not going to make any moves. I'm glad that they're still moving some pieces around and trying to tinker with stuff because you can't bring back the exact same roster as last year. You can't do the exact same thing as last year. I know we feel confident that just by adding Terry Francona that you could bring back a lot of the same pieces and get a different result. But sometimes that's not how this works. I don't think David Bell was a god-awful manager. I don't think he didn't get anything out of this roster. I think he got some stuff out of that roster. I think Terry Francona can get more, but you have to give him more too. It can't just be bringing back the same pieces every year and hoping that, well, just by getting better, that this team is gradually going to get better. They got to make some more moves. But I like it. I don't mind it. And by the way, it's a guy with experience. They needed guys with experience, been around a while. I think that also checks that box as well.
They still haven't addressed the only thing I'd argue that needs to be addressed. I don't think we needed a starting pitcher. I love that we have it. I don't think we needed one. I don't think we need relievers. I like that we have them. We don't need them. I'm glad we have a backup catcher. We don't need the world's greatest backup catcher. I think you could find a couple other names in there that would fit.
Yeah.
But you still haven't fixed the one part of the team that needs to be fixed, and that's the offense. We still don't have a guy that can come in here, play every day, and hit home runs. That's what we're missing. You need to go find that person. I imagine they're going to. They're not going to stop trying to find guys on December 23rd. So I bet we have a couple moves ahead of us that are going to make us excited about the Reds in 2025. I like our chances. Terry Francona is, by the way, a guy that did utilize that backup catcher role a lot in Cleveland, that Austin Hedges type of role. They can't really play offense, but he'll be damned if he is a bad defensive catcher. So I'm glad this move was made. I think this was a Terry move because he likes those type of guys in the clubhouse. But moving on from the Reds, some other baseball news, and this is sad baseball news. Ricky Henderson did pass away this past weekend. Very, very sad. Ricky Henderson obviously holds the all-time stolen base record, Major League Baseball, 1,406. He is the only baseball player to have over 1,000 stolen bases. He won an MVP in 1990. He was one of the world's greatest players. If I had to give Ellie a comp, it would be close to Ricky Henderson just because of what he's able to create on the base path. And I absolutely loved watching this guy. I didn't get to watch him live, obviously, but I certainly have watched highlights of him. I got to watch a couple funny interviews with him. The one that went viral this past weekend was he went on Mike and Mike in the morning, and they discussed Ricky Henderson getting his first $1 million check. And what he did was he framed it in his house. He framed his first $1 million check in his house. Well, months go by, and the A's call him up, and they say, someone in the A's accounting, they call him up, and they say, hey, Ricky, did you cash this check? What happened? And he says, no, it's framed up on my wall. And he said, when you grow up wanting to be a professional baseball player, you dream of becoming a millionaire. And he wanted to frame it in his house. So he had $1 million check just hanging in his house. So Ricky Henderson, one of the greatest players to ever do it. Very, very sad that he passed away.
Do you not have $1 million check hanging up in your house like we all do?
Oh, Kenner, no, I do not, unfortunately. I do have a
one Derrick Henry first touchdown away from having a framed $1 million check in his house.
Yeah, I do have a bet slip, though. I have a bet slip up in my house. But, yeah, Ricky Henderson, by the way, he played a long time, man. He played 25 years in Major League Baseball. His last year in 2003 with the Dodgers. 2003 with the Dodgers. He had a career WAR of 111. Unbelievable player.
Justin Kenner, Casey McAllister, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here. This is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Last Reds question here, and then we can. I know Jay Cate's talking college football, but I mean we'll force it today if we have to. No, like we talk all the time, a hitter's ballpark that is Great American Ballpark, and that's why the Reds struggle to go get pitchers in free agency. That pitchers don't want to come pitch in Cincinnati because of that. But you would think with having a hitter-friendly ballpark that the Reds would be more of a alluring spot to free agents, to hitters in the free agent market. How come we don't see that play a role. I understand why pitchers may not want to line up to come pitch at Great American Ballpark, but you would think more hitters would as well. And I'm not saying that should necessarily be the case. It's not like that's the case with Colorado either. It's not like they're bringing in the biggest free agents out there either. People lining up to play there, another hitter ballpark. But are you surprised that that's not the case? Because that narrative exists so much. Man, the Reds can't go get pitchers in free agency because no one wants to come, pitch at Great American Ballpark. But yet we don't see hitters want to come hit at a hitter-friendly ballpark either.
I think they want to. I just don't think the Reds have money. The Reds, I mean, they don't have. They can't pay anybody, so they're not going to pay one of the big name hitters to come hit 50 home runs here because he can hit 22 home runs and make triple the money in New York. So that's why. I mean, the Reds' only way to bring guys in here that we all know is through trades. They're not going to sign anybody. I've given up the fact that they'll never sign anybody, and we'll just move on from there. But it is unfortunate because you're right. I mean, if we had a guy in here that would want to prove himself and be like, I'm going to bet on myself, and it's kind of what Nick Castellanos did a little bit. He had career years here, went on, got his $20 million from the Phillies, and that's where he is to this day. So I don't think people are willing to bet on themselves anymore, especially when that guaranteed money's out there somewhere by one of the 4 or 5 rich teams that just have a monopoly on this entire league.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to. It's the money.
Yeah, but like you would also think too, from a front office perspective, that you would put more initiative on trying to get guys with power to hit in that ballpark as well. Like I don't think that the front office doesn't take advantage of a game plan to take advantage of their small ballpark as well. And that's what drives me nuts. And that's not a hot take. That's a very common take. I see that all the time. But it made me think of it just because I saw Brooksgate put this out over the weekend. How much extra distance baseballs travel at each MLB stadium on average just from last season. The Reds, plus 2.7 feet is the average extra distance that baseballs travel at Great American Ballpark. You want to know who's number 1 on that list?
Number 1. Let me take a guess first. Number 1 hitter-friendly ballpark. Yankees? New York?
So it'd be Coors Field, but the amount of extra distance. The amount of extra distance that these balls get at Coors Field, we always hear that narrative. Oh, Coors Field, the ball carries more there. It's significant. So at Chase Field in Arizona, the ball carries on average, an extra distance of about 7.9 feet. At Great American Ballpark, 2.7 feet. At Coors Field, 18.4. That is quite a jump. That is quite a jump right there. But me, big on numbers, guys. I just can't get enough of the numbers. The stat. But all right. Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. College football playoffs over the weekend. So much drama. It's a horrible product. Why the hell is this team in it? For how bad the product everyone says it is, it's amazing how many people watched it and will continue to watch it. We'll discuss when we come back. More Off the Bench next. Jacob, I'm making you do it. I know you said you didn't want to. that, but this is kind of sad, Reds fans. This is
Yeah,
kind of not trying to be too
Sean
negative.
Connor with the stat of the day in the chat. 45% of the projected payroll is on Candelario, Emilio Pagan, and Nick Martinez. Not a great look for the Cincinnati Redhawks.
What's that percent again?
45.
Roughly.
Roughly.
Yeah, I they have to sign somebody. They have to bring somebody here so I don't get upset. Because if this is the
Are we close to LA getting upset?
No, but we're gonna be close in February. So
Yeah.
let's just sign somebody so we can all be happy.
To be fair, let's be clear on this too. Like, I do think a lot of it is some of their best players are all first, second, third year guys. Like, so this is a super young roster. A lot of these guys haven't been paid major dollars yet anyways. I mean, you have Hunter Green, who's one of the best pitchers in baseball, and they got him at a steal by paying him early a few years ago. To compare it to football, I'm trying to think. I mean, Joe Mixon would be at the top, but if you go back to that 2021 year where they went to the Super Bowl, I wonder I think you could take three random players that would make up the highest percentage of the payroll on that Bengals roster too, just because of their biggest playmakers all being guys, like Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, all those guys on rookie deals at that point. I wonder, you could take three guys to make up the majority of the payroll from the Bengals that year. That would just be because all their bigger playmakers are all in rookie contracts. So that might play a role in this too. So I don't want to be too negative with the Reds, but is what it is. Off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. All right, so over the weekend, college football playoffs. It was the first year of the college football playoff, first round action. Look, I wanted to believe that there was going to be a March Madness element to this. I wanted to believe that there was going to be some teams that win that we just thought had no chance. That's why I was rolling with Indiana on Friday. And Indiana, by the way, if you did a ranking of teams who knew how to not make it look like they got their ass kicked, even though they got their ass kicked, they would be number one in the country. They would be.
Cignetti knows what he does. He plays so that the Google results are still positive. He doesn't want to get blown out. So when you look him up, and he kind of screwed that up, because now when you look up Kurt Cignetti, it talks about the most cowardly punt in the history of the college football playoff and a bad timeout.
That punt was the most. I watched the entirety of that game. That punt should put him on a ban. He shouldn't be able to coach college football for 2 years.
You can't talk this much crap and then punt from your opponent's territory.
You cannot do it. It was 4th and 11 or whatever, but it's you have to be able to believe in your quarterback enough to get 11 yards in the most important moment of the game. You have to believe that. And if you don't, there's no way you should be in the playoff. But listen, good for Notre Dame. I bet on Notre Dame. I knew Notre Dame was going to win that game by 30.
Yeah.
Shout out to Jimmy. They did blow the cover alternate spread of 13.5 somehow. I still don't know what happened at the end of that game. The very last second, I turned the game off with 2 minutes left, and somehow Indiana covered minus 13.5. But Indiana stinks. That's a fraudulent university, and all their wins this year were against terrible teams.
Yeah, I think I'm not going to do the whole, who gets in and who doesn't get in right now. But I think right now, this first round demonstrated pretty clearly that we should probably value strength of schedule a little bit more than just wins and losses.
Yeah.
I want to start. Can I start?
You can start.
I want to start because you guys are more knowledgeable in college football. I saw both your guys, Kirk Herbstreit, talk on the TV, and I hear him yap, and I hear him yapping. I love him when it comes to broadcasting games. I think he's a good broadcaster. When it comes to his opinions on college football, the playoff committee and the playoff format, and when it comes to who can play for a championship, I think he needs to just zip it. I think it's time for Kirk. I think it's time for Kirk to zip it. I commend college football for trying something different, branching out, trying the 12-team playoff. This is what the casual fans wanted. This is what the casual fans wanted. They wanted a 12-team playoff. They wanted more teams to have a chance at the championship. Here's the fundamental issue with college football. It's not March Madness. As much as we want to make it and try to make it, it's not that. It can't be that. It's so top-heavy that the bottom teams legitimately have a 0.00000% chance to ever win a championship. That's just a fact. So when we start bringing in these 11th and 12th teams in, like SMU and Indiana, I'm sorry, you don't have a chance. Now, saying that, here's what I'm going to say. They did play their schedule, which means they can't be punished because they played their schedule to the best of their ability.
What I'm saying is I would punish them for that.
I know that's what you're saying. I'm saying you can't. Because at some point, Kirk Herbstreit's going to argue the fact, like if let's say hypothetically SMU didn't get their doors blown off by Penn State. Hypothetically, SMU wins that game, and then they get blown out by whoever it is. Who they play next? SMU. Who's SMU playing next?
Boise.
Let's say Boise State blows them out. Then Kirk Herbstreit's going to argue, well, I mean, if you look at it, Penn State would have put up a bigger fight. So even though that Penn State lost, they should still advance. Because that's the craziness of this argument, where I think he just wants to see the best teams play each other, no matter what happens with the regular season. So if that's what you want to do, let's cut out the top 20 teams. There's Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, Washington. I don't know who the top 20 teams are. Georgia. We'll cut those 20 teams out. We'll put them in their own little conference, their own little division, and they'll play what we call college football A. And then the rest of us will be down in college football B, and we'll do the March Madness style thing, and we'll see if that works. Because that's what I think Kirk Herbstreit wants. I think he wants to see the top 4 teams. He basically wants BCS. He wants the BCS. He wants the computer rankings, which I think nobody wants. Nobody wants the BCS. Saying that, if you're going to argue for it, then the 12 team, yeah, you're going to hate it no matter what happens. I think 8 teams is the right number of teams because I don't think there's any team, including Alabama, that could, despite that they would not, 100% would not have been blown out like SMU was. That's 100% true. But they lost 3 games. They controlled their destiny and they still didn't get in.
I would argue SMU controlled their destiny and they lost their game against Clemson.
That's 100% true as well. But Alabama had 3 losses, 2 of them to terrible teams. Not terrible, but not great teams. So I don't know what you can do other than make it 8, get rid of the buys, and let's just do it that way. Because the 12 team, it's just going to get complaints left and right for the blowouts. But there's been blowouts in every single playoff anyway. All the 14 playoffs have had blowouts, every single one of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think except for last year.
No, blowouts have been a problem in the whole history of college football. That's kind of like the nature of the sport, which is why I don't think it's all that surprising that that's what happened in the first round. I mean, people are dunking on, me and a bunch of people that were against the 12-team playoffs saying, you didn't see those atmospheres? You didn't have fun watching these games? Well, of course I did. It was a blast. These were some of the best atmospheres in the history of college football. It was incredible. I was at the Ohio State game. It was the best Ohio State atmosphere in at least 3 years. I loved that. It was awesome. Home playoff games are the best. But these weren't meaningful, impactful games as much as people want to tell you. They were extra. They were sprinkles on top of the ice cream sundae. No underdog had a chance of winning their game. And if you want to talk yourself into Clemson, yeah, sure, that's fine. But I watched that game, and there was never a point in time where I thought Clemson was going to win it. These lower teams just don't have a chance. And if we want to play the extra games because TV money is fun and we get to throw an extra home game at these stadiums, then sure, that's fine. But say that. Say that's why we're doing it. We're not doing it to give SMU a shot at a championship. We're not doing it to give Clemson a shot at a championship. They don't have one. If we had an 8-team playoff seeded without conference buys, just off the rankings, Oregon would play Arizona State this week, Georgia would play Boise State, Texas would play Ohio State, and Penn State would play Notre Dame. That makes a ton of sense. Those are all teams that either won their conference in terms of Boise State, which I always said a group of 5 champions should still get a chance, and all those other teams can legitimately win a championship. I don't know why we have to do 12 and now talk about 16 and get to 20. And
16 would be outrageous.
That's where we're going.
16 would be outrageous. You have to shrink it back down to 8. 8's the good number. 8's a solid number. There's no discourse to be had with the 13th team. There's zero discourse because that team has lost 3 games. 0. SMU, Indiana, they gave the rest of the non-power, and I guess Indiana's technically a power in the power conference. Say whatever you want about the Big Ten, but they didn't play anybody. I mean, Indiana didn't play a single soul this season outside of Ohio State, and Ohio State beat their doors off. So, same thing with SMU, pretty much. I mean, SMU played 1 solid team, 2 solid teams this year. They won 1, and they got their doors run off by Clemson. So, I don't know if there's a right answer here. I know that people want to see more playoffs. They want college football desperately to be March Madness, but it's not. And as much as you try to make it that, the farther away it becomes from that. 16 teams in college football where the one plays the 16. Could you imagine that score? That's a 40-point victory. Nobody needs to see that. I like having the home games. I love it. I would argue that that's probably the coolest thing that's happened in college football in the last 15 years.
Yeah, 100%.
But
you can do it next round.
But if you're going to have them play teams that don't deserve it, or I guess I should say that aren't nearly as good as those top teams and aren't even remotely in the same ballpark, then it's never going to be a fruitful outcome for anybody. We're all just going to sit here and complain about it, and I don't think that should be the takeaway from the weekend. It has to be, but it shouldn't be. There needs to be an answer, and I don't know what it is. You can't go back to the BCS because everybody hates it. The 4-team playoff wasn't enough. 12 teams is too much. 16 teams would be outrageous. I think 8 is as good as you can do, maybe even 6. If you did 6 with 2 buys, maybe that's the answer. We tried it, and we desperately needed Indiana or SMU or Clemson. We needed somebody to fight, and none of them fought. Clemson was the closest thing to fighting. Tennessee got their doors blown off too, so they don't get a pass. Yep. Indiana, Tennessee, lump them all together because they all got trashed.
So, and you guys brought the blowout thing a little bit ago. Blowouts, and you guys said it already. Blowouts have been a part of the playoff from the beginning. I just think that there are some teams. This is going to sound weird. Some teams who deserve the right to go get blown out, and other teams who don't deserve the right to go get blown out. And I think that's what this comes down to. By the way, what college football has done to this point with this playoff, it has put people in position to say things that we all understand. And instead of saying, I understand where he's coming from, we choose to beat up on that guy or gal and say that they don't know what the hell they're talking about. For instance, Exhibit A, Kirk Herbstreit going on. He did the hit on SportsCenter afterwards with Linda Cohn after the Tennessee-Ohio State game. And she had basically just asked him, okay, the first round's officially in the books. What's your overall takeaway? Because of copyright stuff, we can't air that clip on the show today. But he basically goes on to say, and this is what people keep jumping on, is, well, we got too caught up in all the wins. And we all understood what he was saying, but we chose to be offended by what he said and said, oh my gosh, Kirk Herbstreit saying that wins don't matter. That's not what he's saying. That's what you're choosing to twist it to say that he said. But what he is saying is that what we can't do is completely ignore the fact that some teams who had high win totals literally played nobody. And then we rewarded that as opposed to looking at the teams who, yes, had more losses instead of breaking it down. Well, why did they have more losses? They had the higher probability of picking up losses because they had more weapons on their schedule. They had more tough teams on their schedule. This to me, it's not that difficult to understand why those who didn't want SMU in, who didn't want Indiana in, who didn't want Boise in, I understand their takes. It's not an elitist mentality, but it really does come down to we are trying to judge everybody based on their resume, and we're judging them off the results of a race that not everyone is starting from the same starting block. And when you're giving Indiana and SMU a head start because there's no challenges in front of them, of course they're going to come out looking like they're faster than Alabama and others who start behind them because of the more difficult teams that they play. Now, I don't feel bad for Alabama. Don't lose to Vanderbilt. I don't feel bad for. I'm not going to sit here and say that those losses don't matter. They put themselves in that position. A 2-loss Alabama team is making it in over an SMU. They are making it in over an Indiana. There's no doubt about it. I don't feel bad for Indiana or for Alabama over any of those teams that didn't make it. However, force-feeding teams in just because they ended up with one loss because they literally played nobody, I see why people are upset with that as well. Here's the other takeaway. Jason Fitz, who we just had on the show last week, I remember when he first started coming on the show, he was still working at ESPN, and he said one of the first conversations that they had with the ESPN playoff panel was the fact that the whole thing that they wanted, the whole goal of the playoff was, yes, to crown a national champion, but 2 was to create chaos. And that's what this provides. So if you want to ask me if this playoff has been successful so far, the results on the field will tell you no. But, oh, my gosh, look at us. We're pissed off about SMU. We're talking about SMU football. We're talking about Indiana Hoosier football. We're going to be talking about Boise State a lot this upcoming couple of weeks. We're technically doing exactly what the whole goal of the playoff was, which is to get us to talk about it. It was never set up to be fair from the very beginning. Think about it. 4 playoff spots. You have 5 Power 5 conferences at the time. There was 5 Power 5 conferences at the time. for 4 playoff spots. There was always going to be a Power 5 conference sitting on the outside saying, what the hell? We're a Power 5 conference. How do we not get any representation in the playoff? It was never set up to be fair. You have teams who weren't Power 5 teams like Cincinnati and others who were like, well, hold on, look at us kicking ass over here. And you mean to tell me there's nothing for us to show for it? Look how much had to go right for Cincinnati to make it. I'm not giving the committee credit for putting the Bearcats in. It took Ohio State losing multiple times. Otherwise, if their only loss was against Michigan, I guarantee you a non-Big Ten champion, one-loss Ohio State team makes it in over that Cincinnati Bearcat team that made it a few years ago. Bottom line is this was never set up to be fair. It won't be fair moving forward. I don't even know if they'll make any drastic changes. One of the biggest changes I think that they'll make is maybe get rid of the auto buy or something. I don't know how you go about doing that. But I think this has been a successful weekend of the college football playoff. People are passionate about it. The matchups were horrible. They were all blowouts. And yet we're talking about these bad matchups more. By the way, go look at all the bad matchups in the NFL. No one can. Those bad matchups in the NFL resulted in 0 buzz and 0 talking points coming out of the weekend. All blowouts, all horrible games from the first round of the college football playoff, and everyone's talking about it. From that perspective, to me, kudos, college football playoff. I think you won. I think you won from that perspective.
Let me ask you this, and this is why I get on Kirk specifically, because Kirk doesn't care about results. He doesn't care about who you win. He doesn't care about who you lose to. He cares about what the rankings were before the year, and he cares about if he thinks that they're good enough to win a national championship. That's why I have an issue with Kirk, because he doesn't want to watch the games. He doesn't want to play the games. He doesn't care that Indiana won 11 games. Texas hasn't beaten anybody. Texas beat the one team that everybody uses as the staple point, as look, we beat a good team in Texas A&M. But then Texas A&M isn't. I mean, what is Texas A&M? They're not a playoff team. They're not very good. Like, that's Texas's good win. Nobody complains about Texas, and that's what Jolly in the chat said. Texas has beaten nobody this year outside of Texas A&M, who again everybody uses Texas A&M as their big win. So, his issue is when the preseason rankings come out, he thinks Georgia and Ohio State and Texas and the top 4 teams are the top 4 teams no matter what they do during the course of a season. That's what he thinks. He thinks Alabama's Alabama. If they go 6-6, that's Alabama, and that's SMU who went undefeated. I don't care about SMU. Alabama is better than SMU. Like, that's my issue with Kirk. Why play the games? Because they don't. He clearly believes they don't matter.
Texas has the 13th strength schedule in the country, 4th highest in the playoff. So pretty freaking good.
We'll see. I would say
there's 2 teams that clearly don't belong. They're SMU and they're Indiana. They played distantly the worst 2 schedules of any team that was in this discussion. Texas is nowhere close to that debate. Same with Penn State. Nowhere close to that debate.
Yeah, but I'm saying they haven't beaten anybody.
We're talking about strength of schedule.
Sure, but Kirk was bringing up wins and losses.
Having a tougher strength of schedule means you have to look at their wins and losses. Indiana didn't play anybody. How are they going to get good wins or losses? Texas played a decent schedule. Of course they're going to have a couple.
And from my perspective, and Elliot, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying the way I interpreted it from Kirk was that he wasn't saying that wins don't matter. What he was saying is he goes, we're getting so caught up in the look how many games they won instead of combing through the weeds to figure out how did we get there. And
the
I think
number in front of your losses shouldn't matter. How you got to that number should matter.
Yeah.
Like, just because it's 10-2 versus 9-3, the 2 should not be ahead of the 3. Other stuff has to go into it. Or we need to fix scheduling and make them more even.
Scheduling is the biggest issue of it all.
Also, you were right at first about the separation, but your number was just low. It's going to be 40. 20 Big Ten schools, 20 SEC schools. You play AFC, NFC. You play Big Ten championship tournament, SEC championship tournament. Those 2 conference championships play each other.
That's what it should be. That's what it should be, because it stops this nonsense. It stops this nonsense.
That'd be the best.
They got to stop. I agree. Jolly's just saying good things in here. They have to stop. They have to stop with that nonsense weekly thing where they do their rankings and hype everybody up, hype certain teams up, and don't hype certain teams up for the playoff committee. By the playoff committee, but it's what they do. It's all for ratings. It's all for TV. It's all for money, and they're going to continue to do this until the sun burns out.
All right, let's pick up with this on the other side. We got to get to Dayton and Cincinnati from over the weekend. The Bearcats get a top 25 win on Friday night. We'll talk about that here shortly as well. Ohio State, Tennessee, arguably the most talked about game from over the weekend. We'll get to that more in depth too when we come back. More off the bench next. All right, and we are back off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. Last, a couple more things on this too, and want to talk about the Ohio State-Tennessee game coming up here in a second. This kind of piggybacking off what we just talked about. How we get to decipher who the teams are that are the top teams in the country is kind of a tough ask. You're right. Like, I think that the worst thing of college football is the AP Top 25 poll, the preseason poll, the Top 25 polls that come out weekly. Because we talk so much. You look at the preseason rankings compared to the final rankings, and just how off these are across the board. That's done through obviously the AP putting that out. It's not like college football, controls that coming out. Plus, they like it. It's a talking point. People are talking about their product, so that's not going to go anywhere. But I do think that plays a role in it. I've always wondered, guys, like when the committee sits down, they put out their first ranking in late October or mid-October. Right away, are they looking at the AP rankings and circling the top teams there and saying, okay, these are the teams we need to look at? How are they deciphering what the teams are from the get-go, from the starting block? Like, what is their criteria that, okay, we need to circle the teams that are matching X, Y, and Z? And I think a lot of that has to do with strength of schedule. Well, strength of schedule is based on what technically? Are we we're talking about all the top 25 wins. Well, top 25 wins from a poll that we don't really care about, but we want to utilize it to prop teams up in this conversation. From the time that you beat them, are they ranked when you beat them? But what's their final ranking? Do you still get credit for beating a team that's ranked at the beginning that's not even sniffing the postseason by the end? I get all those talking points. There's not a fair way to put a playoff together in college athletics when everyone does not operate from the same start a race from the same starting block. It's never going to be the case. How you fix it, I don't know. But that's why I said earlier, I'm like, man, at the end of the day, college football won this past weekend because everyone's pissed about something. And the beauty part of it is Elliot, you're not wrong at all about your thinking about, okay, can't say wins don't matter. I don't think you're wrong at all. I look at it differently from the standpoint of, I think you can't say wins don't matter. I think you need to look at how you got there. But I think all aspects are being propped up and all things are being rewarded in some capacity. Not every side's going to be happy. That's just the nature of this when it's all said and done. But I did see Joe Clapp take a shot at Texas, very similarly to what we're talking about over the weekend, when he said, are the guys going to go after Texas's resume? No, probably not. Wonder why. And I put out there that there are some teams that I don't think need to beat somebody to know that they are somebody. And I think Texas is one of those programs for the time being. I think that goalpost moves.
Yep.
I think when you look at recruiting, when you look at who you get in the transfer portal, that's why when people say recruiting doesn't matter, 4 and 5 stars don't matter, whether you like it or not, there's a direct correlation between teams that win national championships and the totals of the guys that had the 4 and the 5 stars next to their name coming in. I'm not saying 3 stars don't develop in anything, but we can't say that doesn't matter. There's a direct correlation between the teams that win titles year in and year out and the most 4 and 5 stars and the most NFL draft prospects, which a lot of that goes hand in hand. When Texas plays nobody, okay, and they play nobody, and yet they're being talked about the same way as SMU and they're being talked about the same as Indiana, you can't convince me that Texas is the same as those teams, no matter how you want to spin it. Texas has played nobody. Jacob brought it up. The strength of schedule, number 13 in the country, that data completely ignores that talking point. They clearly did have a tougher schedule than pretty much the majority of the teams in the conversation that we're talking about here. The reason they get the benefit of the doubt as well is because you know that team's talented. Do I have to play a talented team to know that team's talented? No. Indiana, how talented are they? They're talented. They look how much better this team is compared to years past. I know that they're talented, but let's not act like all those things don't play a role in how we're judging who these teams are coming into these scenarios. Recruiting matters. The transfer portal matters. All of that stuff matters. That's the human element being involved in the back of the minds of the heads of the committee. All that stuff plays a role in this. And when you think of Indiana, how much NFL talent is there? How much NFL talent's at SMU? I'm not saying guys won't be drafted from there, but it's not the same thing. It really isn't. So when all things are equal, everyone's played nobody. How do you start? What's that next thing that you go to figure out who's somebody? Texas is somebody. I don't think Indiana is. And I just don't think SMU is. And I think we saw that over the weekend.
But
everyone points to SEC bias, Big Ten bias. There is no conference bias. There is talent bias. And there is more talent in both of those conferences than anywhere else in the country. And that's why it results in championships. There should be bias to which schools have more talent. That's why schools with 3 losses with more talent should get in over schools with 2 losses with less talent. Talent results in championships. There's not a conference bias. There's a talent bias.
And I agree with you guys. But my argument is the Kinner's whole take just there was that I know what Texas is no matter what they do. Like that's
no. I said with all things being equal. If you're going to bring SMU, Indiana, and Texas, if those are the 3 teams
you don't
we're
need
trying
to be proven as much from a school like Texas.
Yes. Yeah.
What Jacob said earlier has to be these schedules have to be fixed.
Correct.
The scheduling disparity from Texas to Penn State to Indiana, they can't be as different as they are. And it sucks because the way this works is you schedule teams out 5 years in advance, 4 years, 3 years, 6 years in advance, and you can't change that on a dime. You can't do it. There's too much money involved. We got season ticket holders buying season tickets because of a home and home that starts in 2029. There's too much that goes into it. And until you figure that out, we're still going to have these debates that when you look at Texas, Indiana, and SMU, that we're still going to favor Texas because I know what Texas is. They don't got to play anybody. I know how much talent they have. We don't know how much talent Indiana has. They weren't ranked in the top 25 before the year. We don't know. Florida State was ranked in the top 10 before the season, and that was the worst program in the history of sports maybe this season.
Wasn't good.
So I think that the top 25 hurts it. I think that these weekly shows hurt it with the college football playoff. But again, it comes down to the fact that there's no easy fix to this. It's a top-heavy sport. We all know that. I'm a UC Bearcats football fan. Not as much as I am a basketball fan. I openly admit that. But I do care. I like to see the program do well. UC football has a very, 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 very slim chance to ever win a national championship. Not because the path isn't there. Not because they couldn't go 12-0, 11-0. It's because I know that when Alabama has every player that they do, they have more players drafted in the NFL than anybody else. I know UC is not going to stand a chance. That's just college football. That's what I've always thought the problem with college football was. That's why some people like college football. But you can't really fix that part of it. You can fix the scheduling, and you can make it more easy to understand when it comes to selecting who gets into the tournament. But there's, like Jacob and like Kenner just said, when it comes to the talent side, I know Georgia, Alabama, and Ohio State have as a roster full of NFL players, and SMU simply does not. And that's what there's not going to be a fix to. You don't fix that. So it's going to be the best 4 teams fighting for a championship no matter what. The water will find its level no matter how many teams they extend this playoff to.
I get that, but at the same time, you look at the playoff field this year. Everything you said is true, but the field says that's not true because Alabama's not in, Ole Miss isn't in. A lot of teams that I think were significantly better than some of these teams that made it. This year,
and they're not going to make that mistake again.
Oh, they're going to.
I'm interested.
They're not making that
two,
mistake again.
And maybe that's what the committee wanted.
4-team because Alabama missed it. 4-team went to 12-team because Alabama missed it. 12 teams going to go to 16 teams because Alabama missed it. Roll Tide.
Connect those dots. Connect those dots, if you will.
And it sucks because the playoff worked as well as it could have worked. It did this season. It just sucks that it went so wrong for those of us who rooted for the reason that they implemented, which was the chaos.
You sent me a text that I know hurt your soul, like halfway through that second game.
Which one?
I think Jacob was right about the 12-team playoff.
Well, because I was
about the blowout.
I was cheering for it. I was rooting for it because I thought it was the first cool thing that college football's done. You get the home atmosphere, you get a March Madness type feel, but it's just what I keep saying. It's not March Madness. It's not close to March Madness. Farley Dickinson isn't beating Purdue. It's not happening. Not in college football. It's a different world when it comes to the top of the SEC and the American Conference. It's not the same universe. In basketball, you can get hot. You can make free throws down the stretch. You can make 5 threes in a row. Dunk City happens. Crazy storylines happen. There are no crazy storylines in college football, and the sooner we come to terms with that, the better it is for everybody. Because you just got to expect the best of the best will be playing for a championship no matter what. You can try to get the little dog a chance, but he can't be in the fight. He's not in the fight.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, SMU and Indiana had a lot of pressure on them for one to win their games, yes, but two, the play here's the deal. We all had hot takes about Indiana, SMU, Boise, should they be in, should they not be in? But they had a chance to shut all of us up by SMU going out there and knocking off Penn State, or at least losing by a field goal against Penn State, and it comes down to the final possession. SMU looked like, and by the way, SMU is a Power 5, Power 4 program. They didn't look like they didn't belong out there with a program that continuously loses big games. Anytime the light gets bright on Penn State, they crumble. And I thought, man, we're going to see Penn State crumble. I thought the likelihood of Ryan Day, James Franklin, and guys like that coming out unscathed of this first weekend.
Ryan Day, James Franklin, Marcus Freeman, 3 ranked wins.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I was doubting. Those 3 all have a habit of losing big games when the lights get the brightest, and all 3 came out and just dominated their opponents. So good for them. But SMU, Indiana had an opportunity to silence a lot of people, to vindicate the committee. Boise still has a shot. Can you imagine if Boise punches their ticket to the semifinal? They have a chance to do that. If Boise knocks off Penn State, all the pressure's on Boise to vindicate the committee, to say, hey, the little guy does have a shot. The little guy can come in. We've watched Boise, who lost by possession against Oregon. They gave Oregon everything they could handle back at the beginning of the season. Oregon's undefeated, Big Ten champs, all of that, number 1 team in the country. Boise's capable. Boise goes out there, they have a chance to vindicate the committee just a little bit. But SMU and Indiana completely failed everybody. They let everybody down, and that's what, when people are mad about a 3-loss Alabama team or others making it moving forward, I blame Indiana. I blame those teams because they had a chance to give us that March Madness vibe, and they did it.
Indiana pisses me off. Kurt Signetti should be ashamed of himself.
Indiana had 2 big games on their schedule this year. Kurt Signetti played both games for a margin.
Yep.
He did not play to win either game.
That's the shame, because those kids deserve better than that. They didn't deserve.
At least
to not
he got
have
his
a chance.
3-hour media tour before the game.
Correct.
Biggest game in the history of your program. He's sitting on game day talking about how they don't just beat top 25 teams. They beat the crap out of them. Hey, Ellie, you want to take a guess how many top 25 wins Indiana has this year?
I'm going to take a guess and say 0.
Yeah.
I thought that bit was a sham, because Kurt Signetti at no point during that Ohio State game, when he had a 9-minute run drive where Ohio State was just playing prevent defense, where he just tried to score a touchdown to cover the margin of loss. That makes me sick, and that's exactly what he did against Notre Dame. So good for him. He's a fraud. Who do you think's the biggest loser of the weekend, though? Because Tennessee got their doors railed off too. I mean, they got absolutely crushed by Ohio State. They were never for 1 second in that fight.
I still somehow think it's Signetti, because going into this game, he had a chance to win this game and be a national hero. Everyone loved him going into this game. And for them to lose like that, with the punt like that and the timeout like that, there's a big national turn on Kurt Signetti, it feels like, at least on social media. And I think that's pretty bad news for a guy you locked in through 2032.
I like cheering for the underdog, but man, he has made them the most unlikable underdog in the history of sports.
Ever.
So good luck to him next season, because they are the team with the number 1 target on their back. Everybody wants a piece of Indiana next. Google me. Shut up. I think Tennessee might be the biggest loser, because I did think that game was going to be close. I was a little bit concerned that Ohio State wasn't going to cover that 7.5 spread. It was over literally from the start.
Instantaneously.
It was over from the start. I knew SMU was terrible. SMU shouldn't have been in. They were in because Alabama lost to Oklahoma by 30. That shouldn't have happened. If you don't lose that game, Alabama's in. But saying that, you had to put SMU in this year. This time around, SMU had to be the team that got in. They won't make that mistake again. I knew they were bad. Tennessee should have been better. Maybe that's just the public perception that I thought Tennessee would be better. But Ohio State clearly unbelievable, and they got a hell of a game coming up.
Yeah, that's going to be a good one.
Question.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I want to go back to you. I was like, that's a good question. The biggest loser out of the weekend, in a weekend where we saw 4 blowouts, 4 teams got their doors kicked in. That's a good question, Jay. Like, who the biggest loser out of the weekend is? Who I think Indiana, but Elliot brings up good point about Tennessee as well.
Yeah, I think all the losers are pretty big losers. Is the other thing. I mean, like none of these. I guess Clemson. You can talk yourself into it.
Clemson. Okay, if Clemson scores that touchdown, it would have cut it to a 1-score game in the 4th quarter, and that would have been a fight. They definitely fought, because they could have rolled over and died when they were down 20 points. And they did not roll over and die. Clemson absolutely
And they
fought.
snuck into the playoff by winning a conference championship game they shouldn't even be in if Miami doesn't blow it. Like, they deserve a lot of credit for how they handled the back half of the season. I'm just saying this game as a whole, I mean, you lost by 14. How much can you really hold on to? I was pretty openly against the 12-team playoff coming in. I knew the first round, at least thought the first round was going to go this way. I don't feel the same way about the second round. I like Arizona State, and I like Boise State.
Yeah.
Both at the number you're getting right now. Boise State getting 10.5 points. Arizona State 2 touchdowns. I think those two elite running backs could make those games at least closer than that suggests. I think that's a big overreaction to a dominant week one. I do think something that we're going to have to think about when we're betting on these games is the rest versus rust debate.
Yeah.
We haven't seen this in college football. This is 3 weeks off for these schools with a bye. Are these 18, 19, 21-year-old kids ready to play football after taking a month off? Are these coaches having them ready to go for a new game? In the NFL, if you have elite coaches, you say, all right, 3 weeks of preparation. They're going to be so ready to go for everything on both sides of the ball. I bet a lot of these kids went home for Christmas.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how these buys are going to result in these games. And, I mean, I know we're not necessarily getting the best example because even without the buys, you know, Penn State and Texas probably take care of Arizona State and Boise State. So I'm not going to use those as plot points for the debate. But if Ohio State goes out there and smacks Oregon somehow, if Notre Dame smacks Georgia around, I think we're going to have to really think about, in a different sense, whether or not these buys help you.
Yeah.
Because we were already talking about it matchup-wise. But if these bye teams suffer from sitting down for 3 weeks, this is a really big problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not just sitting down for 3 weeks that's the problem. It's the fact, because keep in mind, usually the format for the 14 playoff is selection Sunday, first Sunday of December, and then we won't see you again until New Year's Day. So both teams are off. You know, all 4 teams are off for the same amount of time. So if there's rust for all 4 teams, everyone's playing rusty equally, if that makes sense. This is different because you get the 3 weeks off, and then you're playing a team that played just 10 days before, so they're a little bit more in rhythm. That's going to be the interesting thing, too. Seeing these teams going in to playing these teams coming off that bye. Ohio State, they're ready to roll. Texas, ready to roll. You know, you look across the board, Notre Dame, Penn State, they've already played a game. They look dominant, and they have momentum heading into into these 4 teams that have all just been sitting down for the last 3 weeks. I don't want to be disrespectful. They're not just sitting down. They're preparing, of course, but nonetheless. So, all right, this is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube.
One more thing before we get off the playoff. There's only one high seed underdog in the second round, and it's the undefeated number 1 Oregon.
Yeah.
And we don't think there's a massive problem with this format.
Yeah.
You go undefeated, you win your conference, you're the number 1 overall seed. You're a 2-point dog in your first game. Congratulations.
That's crazy.
The team they beat's favored by 11.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Let's talk about Ohio State a little bit. Kirk Herbstreit has everyone pissed off in Columbus. Ohio State dominates Tennessee over the weekend. Do got to give Tennessee credit. Jake, close your ears. I know you don't like to give Tennessee credit, but they invaded the shoe. I know they said they weren't going to invade the shoe. 40% of the fans that were there, orange all over the place. Ohio State fans obviously were loud themselves, don't get me wrong, but how do you let Tennessee do that? How do you let Tennessee invade your home stadium? It created what was one of the coolest atmospheres in the history of Buckeye home games, no doubt about it. But what an unbelievable atmosphere there, and it even worked out even better because 40,000 people showed up to watch Tennessee get down 21-0 in the first quarter. How about that? We'll talk about that. Talk college basketball coming up on the corner as well. Bearcats take care of business in their top 25 showdown against the Dayton Flyers over the weekend. We close things out next. You can unplug, Jake. You're good. You can take them out now. We'll be right back. More Off the Bench next. All right, we welcome you back off the bench. Keith, you can come in. You're good. You're good. We're Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. Ohio State takes care of business over the weekend over Tennessee on their home field. And luckily, college football did this thing where they let you split the tickets, right? I think Tennessee got 40% of the tickets and Ohio State got the other 60. Isn't that how it worked out, 40%, Jake? Isn't that what it was? I know you already disagree.
That was the report. Kirk Herbstreit on the broadcast said 40K Tennessee fans, 40,000 of them in a 100-man stadium, 100,000-man stadium. That's 40%. Casey, I just sent you a picture. There's a lot of orange in that scarlet out, man. A lot of orange. Certainly looks like 40K to me.
I don't see the 40.
Yeah, they were sprinkled around. Certainly a good showing by Tennessee fans on the road in the first round of the playoff. It was a good takeover When I was in there, I was in the stadium pretty early. Got to see most of the warm-ups, and a lot of it, for most of that time, I thought it was going to be 40K. I thought they were telling the truth. But all of their fans got there early. As the stadium started to fill out, Ohio State ran them over pretty clearly. I think at worst 80-20, 70-30 maybe if you get lucky, but they left pretty early anyway. So it was good. They didn't really make a difference in the game. And if you can tell in that picture where most of those Tennessee fans are at, they're in that far end zone, right behind the end zone where it says Ohio State, not the near end zone with the Buckeyes. That's the underclassmen student section. So how did Tennessee fans get most of those tickets? I'm guessing you 18 and 19-year-olds went home for the holidays. So a much overblown stadium invasion by Vol Twitter and Vol fans. Ohio State did a phenomenal job. I know a lot of people didn't like the all-scarlet uniforms. I loved them. Thought they looked great. Thought the scarlet out was handled well. And even if Tennessee did do a better job than they actually did, the red LEDs made all the orange look red anyway. So it worked great, and it was a wonderful atmosphere. One of the best college football atmospheres I've ever been to. And I think that if anything is a positive takeaway from these first-round games, it's that they got it right, putting them on the campuses. And maybe we should extend that to the next round, and as many as we're willing to, because it was awesome for fans of the game.
Yeah, I know people don't want to hear, just forcing. It goes back to what we just talked about. You don't want to force Alabama in the playoff. You don't want to force Ole Miss. But can you imagine Clemson at Texas, which Texas blew them out? Obviously, if you get Alabama at Penn State, obviously those matchups would have looked more aesthetically pleasing. The scores could have still been the same, but I mean, aesthetically pleasing from matchups you normally don't get to see, of course. But getting to see Tennessee play at the Shoe, Tennessee fans showed up. Good for them. You talked about the 40,000 fans that Kirk Herbstreit brought up. But it's still way too dang much. It's way too much.
It was a lot.
Tennessee, I know Ross Bjork has been getting a lot of heat for that. Ross Bjork, the athletic director. How do you fumble that? How do you mess that up? How do you allow that many Tennessee fans to invade the Shoe, or at least even create the narrative that that's the case? But at the end of the day, they flipped that narrative because they bragged about how many Tennessee fans showed up, and that was a lot of Tennessee fans disappointed. 21-0 right off the bat. It could have been 28-0, if it wasn't for that weird interception in the back of the end zone. Tennessee's credit, they made it interesting. It's 21-10 or whatever at the half.
Yeah.
They got the ball back coming out. I mean,
that was
Tennessee
the single biggest drive in the history of Ohio State football, I think. Tennessee getting the ball right out of halftime. Because if Tennessee would have went down and scored and made it 21-17, it would have been 100,000 Tennessee fans in there. Or at least it would have sounded like it if they went down and scored against Ohio State to cut into that lead. And you're looking at a 4-point game after that start. Ryan Day would have been coaching for his life. So
I only heard Rocky Top once.
We played it at the end.
Did you?
Yeah, Ohio State played it at the end.
Love that. Casey, I believe, was showing us a photoshopped version of what people thought was at the Shoe.
So that's the image we showed, and I just wanted to do a little more digging. This is a video that was taking.
That looks a lot more.
That's what I said.
Yeah, there's
Go
a
back
lot
to
more. So the top row, I think, is
that
photoshopped
shaded
a little.
area that's dark right above the screen is what I was talking about, where the underclassmen students are at, and that pizza section down below, where Tennessee was able to get most of these tickets. That's where that video was taken from. You see how it comes across behind the end zone? That's all of where they was right there in that behind the Ohio State end zone over there in that corner.
Yeah.
So are we saying that the SEC bias of ESPN they digitally amplified the look of yellow throughout the stadium, or orange on the stadium?
I think they did.
Nice. I mean, I can't even hate that. Good for them. That's
good.
impressive, actually. If they did that good for them. When it's all said.
It really didn't feel, and maybe there were more Tennessee fans and the 21-0 lead helped, but it really didn't feel like there was much Vol support in that building.
Well, there wasn't much to support down 21-0 right now.
No, you're right.
Think about that, though. You made such a big deal about that, and your team just gets punched in the mouth right off the bat. But good for Ohio State.
Big time shout out to Tennessee fans. They raised money for an Ohio State fan's kid who's going through some hospital treatments, got him tickets for the game. They pumped millions of dollars into the Columbus economy because for the last 10 days, they've been playing Rocky Top on all the jukeboxes at local bars.
Really?
So, yeah, they raised the GDP of Columbus while they come in for a playoff loss.
Love that.
Last thing as we wrap things up on the radio side, too, the one thing that made that game interesting is the fact that, when they played Georgia in the playoff 2 years ago, they had two different times they had 14-point leads against Georgia, and it felt like they were about to pull away. So when Tennessee started making that little comeback, cutting it to within a couple possessions, they get the ball back after halftime. That's where I started to get a little nervous. But once Ohio State got the stop and then they marched right down the field and put it in the end zone, we knew it was over from there. Got to give Will Howard credit, too, because I buried him for the last couple of weeks. He looked solid. Jeremiah Smith showed up. They all did what they needed to do. Ohio State coming out on top and taking care of business, and that sets up the rematch with Oregon, and that's what we'll be talking about for the next couple of weeks. But anything else as we wrap up the side the radio side of this?
Yeah, I think the Will Howard thing that you just said is really, really important because he played his worst game of his career at Ohio State against Michigan and obviously resulted in the loss. And then he plays, without a doubt, the best game of his career, not even just at Ohio State, even going back to the Kansas State days, against the Tennessee team who had reportedly one of the top defenses in the playoff.
Yeah.
I mean, this was a team that was supposed to be pretty dominant on the defensive side of the ball, and they just didn't have the athletes and the speed to keep up with Ohio State. Every time that Ohio State pitched the ball to a running back or a jet sweep or anything, they got to the corner in an instant. And all the deep balls and comebacks and slants, they were moving the ball with ease. Will Howard had such a phenomenal day, 24-29, 311 yards. That's 83%. Didn't get sacked. Threw the interception that, man, I don't think it was a pick. But whatever the call was going to stand.
He threw back-to-back passes. I think it was the touchdown and the one right before it. Back-to-back, absolutely insane passes that had no business being completed.
The Jeremiah Smith touchdown, that's SEC's first team All-SEC corner right there, number 3.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ohio State looked pretty damn good. And I'd argue they have the momentum heading into Oregon. So we'll see if Jacob's method comes true where those buys are going to hurt those teams, because I think they might.
I was really, really excited to put an irresponsible amount on Ohio State as a dog, but they're not going to give me the opportunity.
Damn. Now, so real quick, we're all the way back in on this. They shouldn't have opted out.
We'll see.
Yeah, Jake.
We'll see what happens.
Jake,
we'll see what happens.
You're part of the lunatic fringe. We didn't even get into that today.
I tried. I didn't have enough time, but I tried to get a sweatshirt that said lunatic fringe by today. But I'll have it in a couple weeks.
Kick off the new year with it. You are part of the lunatic fringe. There's no
proudly.
Oh well, Kirk Herbstreit's taking the bullets for you though, so that's all.
Look, if my calling card as an Ohio State fan is I disagree with Kirk Herbstreit, I think I'm going to have a lot of friends.
I think you're going to have a lot of friends. Herbstreit stinks, and I hate having to hear him talk. I hate it. I think he's a great broadcaster.
Phenomenal.
But his thoughts on the playoff are a joke.
While we're on Herbstreit, what did you think about him and Fowler dunking on First Take, a fellow ESPN show?
I didn't see
I loved it.
I didn't see this one.
I didn't see this one. No fear of Stephen A. Smith.
I just thought it was. I didn't have a problem with it in that sense.
What did they say?
He said, Herbstreit, I'm paraphrasing, I don't have the quote in front of me, but he said, this whole week, First Take had Ryan Day fired. They were going over replacements. Well, I don't think they're going to fire him now, type of thing.
Okay.
And First Take did not take it nicely. And look, I have no problem with it from what you're saying. I don't think they should be scared of Stephen A. or Shannon Sharp or whatever backlash they would get. I would have a problem with that if I was an ESPN higher up, that my number one booth is poking at my number one sports talk show. Yeah. There should be some company synergy. That's kind of where my pushback comes.
No, I disagree, because you know how many more people tuned into First Take? They already tuned in.
Now you are right. That is true.
There's a little WWE type stuff there. They like that the storylines. It's setting
Shannon
up.
Sharp did threaten to beat Kirk up.
See, Shannon Sharp and Stephen A. Smith will tag team at WrestleMania 42 to take on Kirk Herbstreit and Fowler, with the manager being Lee Corso coming down. Let's be clear. You imagine the dog running down first?
Speaking of old men in college football, Lou Holtz picked Tennessee to beat Ohio State. So take that, Lou Holtz.
Yeah. Yes.
Ryan Day's still wondering where he's at, by the way.
Kenner, I saw that you retweeted a Shannon Sharp post yesterday.
Yes, I did. I'm all about Shannon Sharp. He brings up points that other people won't, because you guys keep bringing up the full set of numbers, but the turnovers are low. But when you turn the ball over, kind of matters. I'm just saying, if the Browns had a competent quarterback, they win that football game yesterday. Joe Burrow was just trying to. Joe Burrow he did more as a Browns quarterback than any Browns quarterback. Joe Burrow was trying to win the game for Cleveland.
Joe Burrow understands that we're not going to make the playoffs, so losing that game would have helped with the draft position. Uno reverse. Take that.
Just saying. But,
DTR
nice try, Elliot.
Terrible.
Darn. He is. You're going to hear an argument from me. But, hey, I got to bounce. We got the Keith Byers Show coming up here in Dayton on 1410 ESPN Radio. So I'm out of time. So I got to jump out. Appreciate you guys. This has been Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers.
Cats, he said we were going to talk about them. I'm going to talk about them for a little bit. Massive win over Dayton on Friday night. 66-59, the final score there. Top 25 victory on a neutral floor. I don't care that it's in Cincinnati. You're playing at that dump that is the Heritage Bank Center. Dayton fans travel well. That's a 50-50 road neutral game. So, very, very good win. They beat Grambling by 4,000 points yesterday. Didn't matter. But I will say this. Here's what I'll say about the Cincinnati Bearcats. If they're able to figure out the post a little bit, this is no knock on Aziz, but I'm going to need Aziz to be better. I'm going to need him to be a lot better than he is. And I don't know if that's going to be possible. He just can't do anything outside of the alley-oop. And if you're going to hope to win games in the Big 12.
But the alley-oops are cool.
Yeah, but like they don't even hit at like a 75% clip. They hit it at like a 40% clip. He scored 6 points against Dayton and had 3 rebounds. 4 of those were at the free throw line. So we got to figure it out down low. We got to figure it out because you can't rely on CMOS and Jizzle to bail you out every single time. We're going to need more. Dan Skillings looked phenomenal. I said he was going to be the X factor. He absolutely was. 17 points, 6 boards. He was incredible. I love this Bearcats roster. I think they're going to make some noise come March. They just got to survive the Big 12. And if you're able to go 500 in the Big 12, it's a tournament team, despite what Jeff Goodman, is that guy's name is?
No, you look good in orange.
Did you see the Jeff Goodman tweets yesterday? No. Did you see him? So Jeff Goodman, he's a college basketball guy. And he started tweeting out that his top 25 teams. He had Dayton in the top 25.
Not UC.
And not UC.
After their game?
After their game.
That's good.
So I don't know what that was about. I don't understand that because what if Dayton has more losses and then UC has 1 loss. Say whatever you want about Villanova. That's a quad 1 loss. Villanova's a quad 1 loss. So I don't know what we're talking about. I don't know why we have to get all upset. Xavier, here's what I'll say about Xavier. And I know Mascop's in this chat right now somewhere. Xavier is putting up a hell of a fight without Fremantle. I thought they were going to roll over. They are absolutely still a decent team this season. They had to play their 3 toughest games of the year back to back to back. Didn't lose any of them by a lot of points. They are absolutely fighting. And if they're able to figure it out a little bit in Big East play, I think that team maybe could sneak in. You just need to. I mean, you have to finish and close out games. But Conwell was tripped at the end of the Marquette game. I don't know if you saw that play. Conwell was running down the court 3 seconds.
Is that I don't really have a problem with not calling that.
No, that was a trip. If you look at the angle that I think Paul tweeted it, if you look at the angle, his leg was very clearly out. He was making an effort to step out.
I didn't see an angle other than the broadcast, but from the broadcast angle, I didn't really have a huge problem with that.
But we'll see. Xavier's fighting more than I thought they'd fight after losing Zach Fremantle. I bet on them. I bet on UConn minus 13.5. I bet on Marquette. So Xavier's coming up covering at least, if you have to give them any kind of credit. Bearcats conference schedule comes up next. You got Kansas State. Hopefully that'll be a fruitful victory there, but we'll see.
Now that UC has beaten Dayton and Xavier,
sure,
I am rooting for them to win a lot of Big 12 games because
okay.
I need you to get a higher seed so that it can tear you down.
Damn.
Because the opportunities for pain for Bearcats fans, I've lost those.
Yeah.
So we got to get you up.
Yeah.
And then it hurt more.
Yeah, that's fair. I think the Bearcats are in for a hell of a season. We'll see how it works out. But you got your biggest 2 non-conference wins.
What's his face? Rocks. The kid that can't shoot free throws.
The kid who can't. Dylan Mitchell.
He's insane.
Yeah, he can't shoot free throws, but he's really good.
Can he jump from there?
I don't know.
Because he could.
So if you jump at the free throw line and lay it in but you get the ball off before you touch the ground, is that a free throw? Is that a legal free throw?
This is the oldest question in the history of basketball, and the answer is definitely no. But I think yeah.
I feel like you should be able to. I mean, it's gonna be a problem when UC's up 3 points against one of these Big 12 teams, and Dylan Mitchell goes to the free throw line and shanks them both. You can't miss 2 free throws at the line every single time. That's unfortunately what he does.
Bad free throw shooters miss 1 every time.
Yeah,
he misses them both.
He misses both. He's just really, really. I think he's shooting 20% at the line.
But he's your best player.
Yeah.
What a world. That's
strange,
so crazy.
Isn't that a wild place to be?
Honestly, I haven't watched much UC basketball this year. I watched some of the shootout, but that was really it. I was watching some of that Dayton game just because I was out for the
Yeah.
playoff game and they had it on. It's like, with what I hear you say about Dylan Mitchell, and it's mostly the free throws, because there's no reason to talk about the great, obviously, more often than not. Like, I knew he was good, Texas transfer. He's awesome.
He's fun to watch.
He's awesome.
He's fun to watch.
And he can't make free throws.
He can drive. He can score inside. He can't shoot a three. He can't shoot a three, and he can't hit free throws. But I love the way he does everything else.
Yeah.
I just hope it doesn't cost him. I know it's going to. It's going to be unfortunate. Outside of that, any other thing? Did anything else happen this weekend? I don't think anything else did.
Casey?
No,
Nothing eventful?
no, nothing that I can think of.
You had Christmas stuff all weekend, didn't you?
Yeah.
How was it? Good time? Good gifts?
Yeah. I got new Hey Do shoes. Yeah.
Nice.
Love that.
Wait. Those are just a new pair of your old Hey Dude shoes.
Correct.
Okay. Love that.
I love them so
So-
much.
Dudes
Got a second
rock.
pair.
Dudes rock so much. You get a pair of shoes you love, you get dirty, you buy a same pair.
So this shoe has been here for a year. I am getting the exact same shoe for Christmas.
Love that.
The exact same shoe.
Love that.
It'll just be brand new. So I'm very excited for that.
That's big.
You watched the Bengals game, right?
Yeah, I did.
For those of us that had Jamar Chase props, what an unbelievable score at the end. What an unbelievable. I love Joe Burrow more than I love anybody else because that is incredible
Elliot,
how he threw that ball.
I had Jamar touchdown, Joe Burrow 3+, Joe Burrow 250 parlay. It hit on that throw.
Unbelievable. I thought I live bet Jamar Chase over, I think it was 88.5 or something yards, something wild. He needed like 4 yards to get it.
Yeah.
And there was no chance he was going to get it. I turned off the game and I went to red zone because it was over. I went to red zone and there he comes. They show the highlight and I'm like, oh my God.
There was a
yes.
I forget his name now, but there was someone in our chat yesterday in Chatterbox Bengals that was going crazy all day. Need a Jamar Chase touchdown. Need a Jamar Chase touchdown. They get down to the goal line before the bootleg, one of the worst play calls of all time.
Yeah.
And right at that point when we're down there on the goal line, he's going crazy. Need a Jamar touchdown. Craig's in the chat. No chance, man. It's dead. Give it up. No way. As soon as Jamar scores, I'm just screaming at Craig. I'm like, this is an unusable clip now because I'm just blaming Craig
so
for saying
good.
it was dead.
That's so good. I have Jamar Chase in fantasy too, which was huge. By the way, tell me if I can win this. I know nobody cares about my fantasy lineup, but tell me if I can win this.
My heart ripped out of my chest twice.
I'm down 19 points heading into Monday night. 19 points. My opponent had Brandon Aubrey, who decided to kick 4 50-yarders yesterday.
I got Aubrey.
Yeah, getting Aubrey is the worst. I'm going to draft Brandon Aubrey in the 3rd round next year.
I scored 171 points.
Oh, no.
I lost by 22.
Oh, no, Aubrey. Oh, no, Aubrey. Anyway, so I'm down 19 points. Tell me if I can win. I have Josh Jacobs left. He has nobody.
19?
19.
You could.
I think it's what would you put the odds at? 3-1 plus 300?
Yeah.
That's what I think it's at too.
Yeah.
That's what I think it's at too. So we'll see. But we are going to do box lunch. We're going to do box lunch. Give us a couple minutes, and we'll be right back with you. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. Shout out to Dave, my guy Dave Stamper. He listens to this show. I want to give him a shout out. So thank you all. We love you all. Ed, Mousecop, Everett, Mark, David, Mr. Mo, Harry, Blackmore.
Ed said even I get wished a
Chase?
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, did you?
He said everyone, even Jacob.
Okay, all right, I like that. I think Reed's coming in. Mike Ackley, everybody who I didn't say, thank you very much. Game Day's in here. Anybody else? Sean Connor, thank you. Matt, everybody. Mousecop, everybody. Love you all. Fred, we'll see you on Box Lunch in a couple minutes. Bye-bye.